Hello again from Metro Manila, the Philippines, Southeastern Asia, and a happy and blessed Saturday to all of you. Since February 2019, the United States' largest Protestant denomination, the Southern Baptist Convention, where, for example, many members of the extended Graham family belong, many if not most, has been rocked by a series of revelations how stunningly and lamentably large number of pastors, evangelists, and other ministers of the gospel of that denomination have been accused of or even convicted of sexually harassing and or abusing people of different ages, whether children, teenagers, or fellow adults. And this article appeared in the Christianity Today magazine on May the 17th, 2019. It was written by Kate Shellnutt, and it was entitled as follows: 10 Women Who Are Changing the Southern Baptist Response to Abuse. Meet the survivors and advocates whose voices spurred holy rumblings, in quotation marks, in the nation's largest Protestant denomination. For many years, even as revelations of sexual abuse by clergy had been coming to light for decades in the Catholic Church, the evangelical church had not had eyes to see or ears to hear the extent of its own abuse crisis. But in 2018 and 2019, women brought new attention to the silent suffering of those whose stories were ignored, stifled, and left untold. Among Southern Baptists in particular, these advocates in churches and ministries platformed the cause and supported survivors pursuing justice, healing, and reform. In the words of that denomination's probably most famous female Bible teacher, Beth Moore, by and large, the naive, in other words, childish, couldn't fathom it or fully understand it. The knowledgeable wouldn't risk it. The perpetrators were good at it, and the victims were blamed and shamed for it. Faced with a growing wave of survivor stories and a newspaper investigation unearthing over 700 victims, the Southern Baptist Convention, SBC, is no longer downplaying the problem. SBC President J.D. Greer said the body of churches needs to repent of a culture that has made abuse cover-ups and evading accountability far too easy, months after launching a study group to develop new resources and recommend policy changes. In the SBC, pastors, professors, senior leaders, and even a prominent seminary President Paige Patterson at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary have lost their positions over mishandled allegations or their own misconduct. Some congregations facing scrutiny over abuse have withdrawn from the Southern Baptist Convention. Southern Baptists will vote at their June annual meeting on whether to add a provision threatening to disfellowship churches without adequate protocols for addressing abuse. I think Megan Lively is one of those women who have come forward accusing one or more pastors of sexual abuse or harassment. Let's try to... Yeah, I couldn't continue reading that article because it's restricted to those who are online subscribers to the Christianity Today magazine. I can get the newsletters, but I can't read these in-depth articles. https://nationsmedia.org hope-for-change. I'll try to unearth this article. The names of the other women I wasn't able to read out. And this article is entitled "For Hope for Change in an Age of #Church to Sexual Abuse." Written by Abby Perry, published on August the 15th, 2019. How reformer Megan Lively urges the Southern Baptist Convention toward justice and mercy. It's interesting and sad that while this scandal has been going on, based on my observation of the American Christian media and secular media, because I get numerous newsletters in my inbox every day, probably the most famous, although also one of the most notorious because of his almost uncritical support for Donald Trump, evangelist and even televangelist of the Southern Baptist Convention, Reverend Franklin Graham, has apparently made no significant statements concerning this sexual abuse scandal. And lately he has railed against homosexuality. While that's biblical in itself, he should also speak out, warning the so-called tidy sinners, the so-called decent sinners, that they too have to repent. Yes, homosexuality is sinful, but many other actions practiced by us humans are also sinful. And then he has not spoken out against divorce much lately, probably because of the fact that 3 of his 4 siblings are divorced. One of them 3 times, another one twice, his younger brother Ned once. And the only one of his 4 siblings who isn't divorced, evangelist Anne Graham Watts, is widowed. And at least one of his nephews, Pastor Tullian Chivigian, is divorced and has remarried. Okay, now let's get to the article. I have spoken to Megan Lively before, and I know she lives in North Carolina, but the southern drawl on her voicemail recording still surprises me. Megan sounds like a person who not only would say "bless your heart," but you would genuinely believe that she intended to bless you. By the time the beep prompts me to leave a message, I feel like I've been handed a glass of pink lemonade and welcomed onto a whitewashed front porch swing. On May the 22nd, 2018, the Washington Post reported that a former student at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary said she told Paige Patterson, the president of Southeastern at the time, and other seminary administrators that a fellow student she was dating had forced himself on her in 2003. In other words, either raped or sexually assaulted her. According to the statement given to the Washington Post, none of the seminary administrators reported the incident to the police, and they discouraged the student from reporting the incident itself. 6 days later, Megan tweeted that she was the woman referred to in the article. Patterson was fired on May the 30th. But for Megan, Patterson's firing was not her chief motivation in going public. She shared her story because of an unignorable, overwhelming impulse to protect other vulnerable women. It was never about me, Megan says. It was never about getting someone back. It wasn't about getting someone terminated. It was about helping women. Just after I hang up, Megan texts, "We'll call right back," laying down the kid, then calls me a few minutes later. We talk about motherhood in the summer. Each of us have 2 children apiece, which is to say we talk about how we have rearranged the puzzle pieces of our days in order to have this conversation and have now barricaded our respective selves into quiet enough places to talk. Before Megan's assault, she was, to use her words, ingrained in Baptist everything. Megan attended Campbell University, a Baptist school in Buies Creek, however it should be pronounced, B-U-I-E-S, North Carolina, or maybe Buies Creek, North Carolina, where she was a student worker for the religion department for all 4 years. President of the religion club, and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Religion. Then she headed off to Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina, where she studied from the fall of 2002 until January 2005. Megan was raped in 2003. In other words, during her first year or then second year at that seminary, which is important because people often assume she left the seminary due to her assault. She couldn't have really, because she didn't understand what had happened to her as assault. Patterson told her it wasn't, and the seminary put her on probation for 2 years, a decision she assumed to be punishment for the crime of allowing a man into her apartment. Megan left the seminary because her grandfather had Alzheimer's disease and she wanted to take care of him. She tried to continue on with her studies, but caregiving became all-consuming, so she withdrew from the school. So many people in the seminary world, many students said to me, "I can't believe you are doing this. I can't believe you are leaving school," Megan recalls. And I said, "This is what I've been learning for 3 years. We are to care for our families." I didn't drop out of school. I didn't give up on my education. I put it on hold to care for a family member I love dearly. It was never about me, indeed. If you want to understand Megan, you have to understand this caregiver part of her. It ripples throughout everything. Megan shares the darkest trauma of her life publicly because she doesn't want anyone else to experience the silencing she did. She stays in the Southern Baptist Convention, SBC, because she believes that she can help make it a safer home. This wasn't always the case. Between 2003 and 2018, Megan largely avoided Southern Baptist Convention life beyond attending church. And she didn't have a conscious thought about what had happened to her at Southeastern. But in 2018, in other words, 15 years after this unfortunate rape, Megan started suffering flashbacks. During an argument with her husband, Vincent, one night that May, he asked what she was so angry about. Megan told him what had happened for the very first time. "Megan," he said, "you were raped." Megan never used that word, which is not to say that she had not reported her assault in 2003. She had, thoroughly and in detail. But she had been dismissed and even blamed for the incident, so she shoved the trauma deep inside her. Megan knows now that the pain was seeping out of her, in her recurring anxiety, in frenzied busyness, in her belief that anything bad had happened was her fault. But for 15 years, she just tried to choke it all down. Megan and Vincent decided to meet their pastor the next day. Then Megan wrote to Bruce Ashford, a friend from her days at Campbell, who now serves as provost and professor of theology and culture at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. Megan told this interviewer that this friend responded in the way every man should. Ashford told Megan how sorry he was and said that if she wanted to press charges, administrators from Southeastern would go with her. He asked to inform Danny Akin, president of Southeastern, and then Dr. Akin called Megan and said he had the documentation of her reporting right there in his hands, and he offered to send it to her. "I didn't feel crazy anymore," Megan says. "He read my file and sent me my file to show me that I did report it. I wasn't crazy. I did everything. I did remember everything correctly." In the months that followed, the support Megan received from Ashford and Akin would become vital. She was reluctant to share her file with Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, Southeastern's sister school in Fort Worth, Texas, where Patterson was president at that point in 2018. She knew what would happen, and it did. Once she went public, things got bad. So she had to tell her family, of course, and then some of her family members felt that maybe she shouldn't have gone public because of the politics of the Me Too movement. And yet Megan kept speaking, kept telling her story, kept believing change could come from within the SBC for women like her. Some survivor advocates have scrutinized Megan's choice to remain within the Southern Baptist Convention in part because Megan upholds the Southern Baptist Convention's stance on complementarianism, a view that women and men, or men and women, have different but complementary roles, and that prioritizes male leadership in the church and home. There's no black and white way to grieve or heal, says Megan. I think when we start expecting others to grieve or heal in a certain way, it clouds our judgment or expectations of people. Don't mistake Megan's desire to make room for different pathways for grief, healing, and advocacy is a lack of urgency. She's fighting right now for the Southern Baptist Convention to cover 100% of legal costs, counseling, medical doctors, and medication for any survivor who was abused in a Southern Baptist Convention church, college, university, or other entity. In Birmingham, Alabama, in June 2019, the Southern Baptist Convention's annual meeting took place. At that meeting, Southern Baptists passed 2 amendments to their constitution strengthening their position on sexual abuse. Outside the meeting, survivors and advocates gathered at the For Such a Time as This rally protesting sexual abuse and mistreatment of women in Southern Baptist churches. Let's see. She tells me this story like she just knew going to the rally before it began so as not to distract from the rally itself was the right thing to do. In a way that's painfully obvious and simple. She tells me this story like all she was doing was putting one foot in front of the other in the best way she knew how. When the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention asked her to speak at their upcoming conference on responding to abuse, she said yes. And at the time of the article was written, she was talking to 3 to 5 survivors on a daily basis. I think the Southern Baptist Convention took a period of time to listen and literally lament before they even started considering what they were going to do. That's important. They were willing to hear the really bad things and before they started working on a solution. This, of course, is a point where many disagree with Megan. Some on the outside and even some on the inside of the Southern Baptist Convention don't see listening, they see stalling, in other words, holding back. They don't see lament, they see public relations. But Megan says that unless people stay involved in the process, they can't speak effectively to what's really happening. As Megan pointed out, a database would not have prevented her assault, and many other women have told her the same about their abuses. Megan has talked to survivors who would rather see an abuse prevention and response certification for churches. The Southern Baptist Convention wouldn't be able to require it because of their structure, but Megan believes it would be a contagious thing, so good that you are going to want to do it. The good churches will want to do it, and those that don't are going to be frowned upon. She also knows that Jesus cares for the vulnerable and that he loves the church and that he calls those who follow him to pursue justice and mercy. As long as there are vulnerable people in churches, Megan will keep telling the story about the worst days of her life, and she'll keep collaborating with the leaders in the Southern Baptist Convention who have cared well for her, and she'll keep caring for her fellow survivors. It was never about her.